Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're very sorry for the technical issues, but to all participants, on behalf of the committee with the warmest regard, we have the pleasure of welcoming you to the third day of International Symposium on Open, Distance, and E-Learning 2021. First of all, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Natasha Kravitz, and I will be your host for today. On our last day, we have arranged very exciting agenda lined up for you today. And before we start, let me give you a brief introduction about this event. Ladies and gentlemen, this coming December 2021, Pusdatin Kemdikbudristek is delighted to bring ISODEL back with a new spirit of collaboration with education, stakeholders, researchers, educators, academic communities, and practitioners around the globe responding to the dynamics and challenges of education technology in the new normal, in now and beyond. The International Open, Distance, and E-Learning Symposium, or ISODEL 2021, is organized as a 3-day virtual event starting from the 1st to 3rd December 2021. And this event is broadcast from Jakarta, Indonesia. There will be a series of virtual webinar, virtual exhibition, and good practices that have been conducted by experts from a wide variety of background, experience and practice in the area of open, distance, and e-learning. And also, we have quizzes with a lot of prizes. This year's conference is held online as we acknowledge that the global pandemic has become inevitable, and the world is going through a challenging moment in many ways. And ladies and gentlemen, to start off the event, we would like to invite Professor Lim Cherping as the Education University of Hong Kong to give us the keynote speech. And to Mr. Lim Cherping, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, and selamat pagi to all. I hope you will be able to see my slides, and I would just draw it up. Yep, it should be fine. All right, so thank you very much, MC, and thank you also to the organizing committee for inviting me for this talk. I was in ISODEL, I think in Bali, that was in like 2018, and I really missed the face-to-face interactions that we have. More in the informal setting rather than in a keynote setting, because in this case, I would only be able to speak and I won't be able to interact with you, right? But the thing is, I would be passing you my email address at the end of like this presentation. So if you do have any questions, feel free to contact me. Right, so I'm just going to be talking through with you the pivotal role of teachers for inclusive and quality online learning and their professional development. So the focus is very much on not just the pivotal role of teachers, right, in the online learning environment, but the thing is to be able to look into their professional development as well. How do we ensure that we are able to work with as many teachers as possible with a quality program, right? So I'm Cherping. I'm from the Education University of Hong Kong, right? So based in Hong Kong now, but I am a Singaporean that have been out of Singapore for the last 16 to 17 years in Australia and also in Hong Kong. All right, so let's start with the context of school closure and the learning loss over the last 2 years, right? This is the map of school closure about 1.5 years ago, right? Where you could see that quite a large percentage of schools across the globe, they are either closed or partially closed, right? And if you take a look at Southeast Asia, and if you zoom into Indonesia itself, you could see that in Indonesia, the closure was actually a full closure across from SD right up to the universitas, right? So like the whole range of it, right? So though the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic is a health crisis, but from the education perspective, it is a learning crisis, right? Because once you have got physical school closure, for those who could have access to online technologies, they might actually have access to online learning, right? But quite often, the capacity to be able to provide quality online learning in the school system is quite like limited, not just in like Indonesia, but in the UK, in Australia, and New Zealand as well, right? But I think it's for those who are not able to access online infrastructure as well as devices, right? That would either mean that they will have no access or very limited access to online learning, much less to say a quality one. Right, so the school closure, as what I've said, there are issues with the access to infrastructure, devices, and resources, right? But quite often in a school system, right, there is always a lack of the availability of online and remote learning resources and strategies, right? And how do we cater to students, especially from the marginalized groups? Not just students who are in the rural and the remote areas, right? Like just like the Jawijaya in Papua, right? But also those students with special learning needs, those students who may be staying that may be staying in Jakarta, right? But from a certain socio-economic background that may not have access to the devices. And of course, there's gender, ethnicity, etc. as well. And that may compromise the quality as well as the inclusiveness of online and remote teaching and learning. Right? And the thing is, for those students who could actually access the online learning, there's always the issue of could the students be engaged in their online learning environment, right? So the students would need the support, they would need the scaffold, they would need the directions, they would need the guidance as they work through the online learning tasks or the online learning activities that the teachers have set up for them, right? And of course, the last point is, as we see the emerging industries as well as industries that may have folded, jobs that may have been scaled down during the pandemic, you could actually see the changing demands and the future shape of the workforce. So I think for us as the educators, there's always questions about the relevance of the curriculum, right, to the changing demands of the workforce and industries post-pandemic, right? So as we are looking at all this, right, and when we are looking at the studies of online and remote teaching and learning over the last 2 years, right, one thing that came up consistently, right, is the pivotal role of teachers, the pivotal role of the educators, right? May you be from SD or SMK or universitas, right? And the thing is, as we start to bounce back from COVID-19 pandemic, right, there's always that thinking of how then do we actually address that learning loss, especially for students from marginalized communities, right? As what we could see in the last 2 years, right? And we know that the role of the teachers are really pivotal with respect to online and blended teaching and learning, right? So, which means that in order to ensure access and quality, right? We need to be actually building the competencies of the teachers, right? So what then exactly are those competencies, right? Think as I am sharing with you like this work, you would see that this work about competencies of teachers actually span across the last 10, 20 years, right? In the online and blended teaching and learning environment, right? It is the research that have been done in the like last 10 to 15 years, right? So the teacher in such an online learning environment should be able to analyze context and students' learning needs, right? Whether students have the competencies to be able to learn online independently, right? How do we better engage them? Next, to be able to design and implement quality blended learning lessons, right? Because as we move post-pandemic, right, from the pandemic itself, we could see that there are certain opportunities provided by online learning. So as we move towards a face-to-face classroom, how could we bring some of this online part into the face-to-face part in order to create better quality blended learning experiences for our students, right? The teachers got to develop blended teaching and learning resources. The teachers are supposed to not just be able to provide the learning support for students, right, but also the psychosocial support for students, right? And then after that, there's this whole thing about managing and evaluating blended and online teaching and learning, and of course, planning and implementing assessment both online and blended, right? So as what I've said, different organizations, different theories, they have been looking into this competencies of teachers in online and blended teaching, learning, and environment, right? From the research scholarly side, there have been a lot of work done with respect to the TPEC, right? Technological, pedagogical, content knowledge, right? Whereby we are trying to ensure that teachers would have all these competencies in order to ensure quality teaching and learning online or blended within their classroom, right? So in this case, you could see the interactions between technological knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, as well as content knowledge, right? The international organizations, like the International Society for Technology in Education, right? They have came up with different sets of competencies for teachers, competencies for leaders, as well as competencies for school support staff, right? So in this case, again, you could see how the teachers play different pivotal role in an online learning environment, right, in order to be able to carry out his or her job as effectively as possible, right? And of course, if we draw upon the work by the UNESCO that have been highly cited, right, you will be able to see the whole range and expectations of what teachers are supposed to be able to do, right, in the online blended teaching and learning environment, right, to be able to understand ICT, to be able to apply digital skills, to have the pedagogical knowledge to be able to do that, right, to be able to organize, to be able to manage, and also to be able to engage in their own professional learning, right? I think one big part that the pandemic have really shown us, right, is that the lifelong learning of a person is really important, right? And for us as teachers and educators to be able to ensure that the students that we are working with are able to learn for life. In the first place, teachers ourselves should be able to engage in learning for life as well, right? Which I think is a recurring theme in the ISODEL as well. You know, it's like we need to ensure that we are able to use technologies in such a way that it is able to build certain competencies, to be able to learn independently, to be able to be self-regulated. And all these are actually competencies that are needed to be a lifelong learner, right? And as what you could see, like in the last 2 years, you could see certain jobs become redundant. Even in the case of the pilots, commercial pilots flying passenger planes are expected now to learn really fast to be able to be a pilot for a cargo plane, right? A completely different type of configuration that they need to be dealing with in their cockpit, right? So therefore, actually require them to be constantly learning, right? So which means that if we want teachers to be constantly learning, right, then we need to be providing professional development opportunities for them, right? And one big thing that is always difficult in terms of professional development for a country as big as Indonesia is how do we provide quality professional development for every teacher, right? In the Indonesia, regardless of where they are, regardless of what type of schools they are from, may it be madrasas, maybe private, maybe public, right? Maybe SMK, maybe SD. How do we actually provide the professional development at scale, right, in a quality way? So we want the professional development to be inclusive, right, to include all teachers in Indonesia. We want it to be of high quality. I think the whole notion of teacher professional development quality is something that have been talked about for the last 30 to 40 years. What does it mean by quality, right? Quality in terms of providing support for teachers, quality about learning by doing, quality in terms of active learning, right? But the thing is, as we try to look at inclusiveness and quality, there's always the importance that we need to come to terms that there are unlimited wants, but limited resources, right? Which means that we need to optimize the input and optimize the resources in a cost-effective way, right? So that eventually we are able to meet the expected professional learning outcomes. And ideally, in this case, we would ensure that all teachers are able to be lifelong learners. Right, so what I'm going to be talking about for the next few slides is what type of professional development are we talking about? What type of models are we talking about, right? If we want to achieve equity, quality, and efficiency of professional development, right? So if we take a look at professional development at scale, teacher professional development at scale, right? We are actually drawing upon the principles of effective teacher professional development, right? The key ideas of learning at scale, like massive open online courses, open courseware, intelligent tutoring system, right? And how all this will be able to address challenges in developing countries, especially large middle income countries like Indonesia that is so diverse, right? Like geographically and the development of each region within Indonesia, right? How do we ensure that? Okay, I'm going to share with you a couple of teacher professional development at scale models from India, from Philippines, and also from Indonesia. I would then zoom into an example from the Philippines before I try to tease out what are the key insights that we gain from these models, right? So I actually am part of this coalition that was formed in 2018 in my university, inviting organizations from all around the world, from Asian Development Bank to the USAID, Brookings Institute, universities in the UK, like University College of London, to China, Peking universities, to NGOs in India. And in Indonesia, we also got the Putra Sampurna Foundation, right? The largest education foundation in Indonesia, into this coalition as well, right? To start looking at how do we engage in teacher professional development at scale, right? So this is an example of India, right? Working very closely with MIT in the US, right? Where they try to use massive open online courses on edX, right? And try to ensure that they're able to reach out to as many teachers as possible, right? So courses are developed on edX, right? Massive open online courses are developed on it. Teachers work through it themselves. Those teachers that do not have access to the internet, they come together with a facilitator to work through the MOOC, right? And eventually there are a lot of interactions between the facilitators and the teachers who are taking the course, but that is usually done through MOOCs. But what is interesting is a lot of informal professional learning communities actually sprout out, right? Whereby teachers become connected with the facilitator through Facebook, through WhatsApp, as well as through the Telegram, right? So there are a lot of interactions going on. Model is the India model as well, but what is really interesting in this model is very much aligned to the thinking about learning by doing, right? That teachers, after they have worked through the MOOCs themselves, right, they must be given the opportunities to implement what they have learned and then share what they have implemented and learned. Okay, again, in this case, there are a lot of informal professional learning communities that actually took place through Telegram as well as WhatsApp, right? But what is very different between this model and the previous one that I've shown you is that this model actually requires the teacher to apply what they have learned, right? And then sharing it in a professional learning community as well as in the MOOCs, what they have learned, right? So this is one that is done by Tata Institute and the Open University of the UK. Both of them are also part of the TPD at Scale Coalition. Okay, next, I would share with you a so-called a national-wide teacher professional development at scale program, right, in the Philippines. Right, so this is a blended model whereby it was actually started in 2014, 2015, right? In 2012, 2013, the Philippines early childhood education curriculum actually underwent a transformation, right, with respect to the early childhood education, literacy, as well as numeracy, right? So once there is a curriculum reform, right, I think all national governments and all policymakers, they would know that for the reform to work, teachers must have the capacity, and therefore teachers must be provided with the professional development. I think for years, when you look across different countries, not just in Southeast Asia, but all over the world, one of the most common model being used for professional development at scale is the cascade model, train the trainer model. But the problem about training the trainer model is that it become very diluted in terms of quality, right? Because it depends a lot on the quality of the trainers, right? And then after that, the trainers might be training a few more teachers that eventually are expected to even train more teachers. So it's like a fan approach, right? So in 2014-15, the Department of Education, the DepEd in the Philippines, started talking to the foundation, the FIDED, right? And then trying to think through how we could be using digital technologies in such a way to ensure quality of professional development that is inclusive and that is cost effective, right? So for the first round, actually, it was done by with the funding from the USAID with 4,000 teachers, right? And it was piloted in the Philippines from 2015 to 2016, and eventually an evaluation was being done, right? The pilot study shows that there is a small but significant improvement in the teachers' TPEC, right? And then after that, they could see some like the variation between schools as well as the differences between rural and urban teachers. And it seems like the rural teachers tend to be performing much better, significantly, right? And you could see that the teacher satisfaction was high. And this results was, of course, like supported by data in 6 case study schools, right? Of course, there are a lot of the challenges, right? But the thing is, what is important is based on the evaluation, the Department of Education in the Philippines then decided to scale it up to all 320,000 early childhood literacy and numeracy teachers in the Philippines. Of course, when we look at Indonesia, the number of teachers, it would be in millions, right? But the thing is, 320,000 early literacy and numeracy teachers, K-3, is already considered as really huge, right? So these are some of the key challenges that we'll face as we try to implement it, right? And as we move from pilot to the full-scale implementation, right? We try to address all these issues about the organizational structure as well as decision making. We try to be able to ensure that we tap upon the existing structure of coaching and mentoring by the district education office in the Philippines, right? So this was the model that was eventually implemented, right, in the Philippines for all 320,000 early literacy and numeracy teachers, right? So as you could see, standalone courseware was developed. It was not internet accessible. It was accessible either through a CD-ROM or through a USB drive or from the hard drive. The very reason why that was chosen was because from the Department of Education's point of view, most schools do not have access to the internet, and therefore teachers would be working independently, right, on the courseware without internet access and with no need for internet access, right? So once they have worked through a module, right, in the courseware, they would then go on to apply, right? And every month, the teacher have got to come together in their learning action cell, right? I think in Indonesia, it will be very much like the KKG and the KMP, right? But in this case, they'll come together in that learning action cell every month. And that is being facilitated by an education officer from the district education office. So the facilitation would be done face-to-face, usually in school or across schools, right? And this learning action cell facilitators, who are district officers, would then be linked up to Facebook business, right? Whereby they'll share their experiences with each other about what they have been doing, right? So in this model itself, there is constant reflection by the teachers what they have learned, but they're expected then to share what they have learned and what they have applied in the learning action cell, right? So this would be the case of the Philippines. In Indonesia, right, the Putra Sampurna Foundation are actually working in 10 Kabupaten, setting up a teacher learning center where they work with the local government to buy out the time of the teachers in schools to be master teachers in the teacher learning center, developing professional development courses for between 15,000 to 20,000 teachers in that Kabupaten, right? And then like eventually getting them to implement it. Quite a lot of the work is being done face-to-face and then supported by Schoology, so in a very blended way. And the professional learning community is usually facilitated within either the Kabupaten, the school, or the Kacamatan, right, where they would interact through WhatsApp as well as the Telegram, right? So this is the Teacher Learning Center in Indonesia, right? So based on all these models that I have shared, some of the key insights that we have, right, from all these models is one, when we are doing professional development, we have got to always try to design for scale, right? Especially when we are looking at the national or even the local level. But what is important that it needs to be localized so that it would be meaningful for the teachers. So the first key insight is how do we design for scale and localize for inclusion, right? And I think a lot of the localization for inclusion is done at the professional learning community level. In Indonesia case, it could be at the KKG and the MGMP level that is doing a lot of that localization. Two, we have got to ensure that we match technology's choice with professional learning needs, right? I think the Philippines case have given us a very good example that you do not need the internet, right, to be engaged in professional development at scale. You still could do it through a standalone courseware, right, or intelligent tutoring system that is actually standalone, right? Right, so it is something that we need to be aware of. We need to be aware of the context to use the technologies appropriately. And the last key insight is to be able to act, evaluate, and improve, right? I think when we get teachers to be undergoing professional development, we want them to be working through the materials that we have provided them so that they could eventually act upon it in their classroom. They can apply what they have learned. They should be given opportunities to reflect what they have learned, right? Share it with their peers and eventually improve upon their teaching and learning practices. That's at the teacher's level. At the system level, it is something that whether it's the local government, school leaders, or the national government, there's a constant need to be acting, to be evaluating, and to be improving, right? So the implications then for us, right, for professional development of teachers at scale is we want to be able to design at scale, right, to tap upon the existing system, but allow for a lot of flexibility to adapt at the local level. We want to be able to tap upon information and communication technologies to enhance the professional learning activities so that we could achieve equity, quality, and efficiency. But more importantly, what we are trying to do is to constantly respond to teachers' current experience, context, and their needs. And of course, in order to do so, we need to work like together, right, with different stakeholders from local to national government, from private to public sector, and also across schools, and with parents and community leaders, right, in order to ensure that we are able to sustain such professional development to improve the quality as well as the equity of education in Indonesia, if not all over the world, right? So I want to thank you for listening to me. I am chirping, and do feel free to contact me over the email. Thank you very much, and over to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lim Sherping, for the speech. And now we shall begin our main agenda for today. We have 2 plenary sessions and 2 parallel breakout rooms you can attend. The link can be found in the chat box and in the following slide. In plenary 9, in plenary room 5A, they'll be preserving future children, characters, and education. Preserving Future Children, Characters, and Culture by ICT with the moderator, Dr. Abi Sujak, and the following speakers: Judy Wahyudin, Director of Cultural Human Resource and Cultural Institutions Empowerment, and then Mr. Harry Lappalainen, as Senior Lecturer at Turku University of Applied Sciences, and last but not least, Mr. Wahyudin Sakam, Indonesian Council of Religious Scholars. In plenary 10, in plenary room 5B, with the theme of Preserving Future Children, Characters, and Culture by ICT, with our moderator, Mrs. Dayang Suryani, and the following speakers are: first is Dr. Arif Wismadi and Cahya Karati as ITU consultant, Professor Sumanto Al-Qurtuby, Direktur of Nusantara Institute, and Mr. Tony Priono, Education Consultant, Acer, Indonesia. And ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the plenary session.